Greetings and salutations. One of the most persistent myths in military life is that benefits are automatic, that if you qualify, you're naturally just going to use them, and that if something is important, something will eventually explain it to you, or someone will explain it to you, or you'll read about it on the news. Well, the reality, folks, is very different. Most military benefits are time sensitive, they're sequence dependent, and awareness based. Miss the timing, you miss the sequence, or never receive the explanation, and the benefit either loses value or quietly just kind of poof, disappears from your planning altogether. What I want to do in this video, folks, is to just kind of slow things down and give you context, not to overwhelm you with acronyms, not to tell you what you should have done, but to explain why so many people look back and say, man, I wish I had done this earlier. Well, after this video, you'll have less of those types of conversations and more beneficial ones. So let's talk about benefit number one, which is education benefits where timing matters. Education benefits are one of the clearest examples of how timing changes value. It's very important. Many service members assume education benefits are something you tap into later, after deployment or after PCS moves or even after retirement. What they discover much later, however, is that how and when you use education benefits affects your flexibility, eligibility, stacking, and long-term payoffs. Now, early use can open doors to credentials and consuming paths or commissioning paths and career leverage. Late use often turns education into a checkbox instead of a multiplier. The benefit, folks, it still exists, but the impact is very different. And this is where people say, I didn't realize it worked like that. I cannot tell you how often I heard that. That sentence shows up again and again in the conversations that I've had in my over 26 years of military service. Let's talk about benefit number two, benefits that only work when stacked early. Think about this. Some military benefits are powerful on their own, but the real strip shows up when they're combined early in your career. Separately, they help. Together, they compound. The issue is that no one explains the stacking strategy. We're going to change that. Service members often encounter these benefits one at a time, years apart, without ever seeing, the big picture. Later, when they look at their peers with similar careers but very different outcomes, the difference isn't effort, it's sequence. Benefits were used in a different order, and order matters, folks. Now, what I'd like to do is we're going to talk about benefit number three, documentation or dependent benefits. Now, this is where frustration sits in. I've seen many service members just get frustrated. These are benefits that don't care about your memory. They don't even care about your intent or even your explanation. They care about documentation. If it's not written, it didn't happen. And documentation is easiest to capture in real time. So you want to do it when it's fresh. Years later, recreating records become difficult and, quite frankly, it actually may be impossible. So when people say, I qualified, but I couldn't prove it, this is what they're really talking about. It's not that the benefit was unfair, it's that the system assumes you are informed about this early. And I can tell you, as someone who's seen many people file for benefits with, say, the VA for service-connected injuries, and they often may have injured themselves in service, but what they failed to do was actually have those injuries documented in their service treatment record. So if there's one thing for all those service members who are still on active duty now, make sure you go to the doctor and you have all of your elements, if you will, documented. Thank me later for that. Let's talk about benefit number 4, the transition phase of benefits. Now, there is a narrow window around transitions where certain benefits have maximum impact. And now, if you miss that window and that benefit doesn't necessarily vanish, however, that leverage does drop. People often discover these benefits long after they've already made major decisions. Now, at that point, the question becomes, what could this have changed if I've known this sooner? Now, that's a hard realization, folks, but it's also a very important one. Now, let's talk about benefit number 5, benefits people don't realize they qualify for. Now, one of the most common comments I hear is simply this: I didn't even know I qualified for that. That statement is an admission of ignorance. Well, I guess it kind of is, but it's an indictment of how poorly these systems are explained. Qualifications often exist long before awareness, and by the time awareness arrives, timing has shifted. Let me give you an example of this. I worked for the federal government for many years, and there is a benefit, if you will, or a program that allows you to purchase back under certain situations. And if you check out my channel, and I posted a video on military buyback time. But here's the key. The only way you can do it once you meet the qualifications is that you do it while you're employed in federal service. If you try to do it after you leave or after you retire, wow, boom, it's gone. You've lost the opportunity to buy back years. You know, I've seen people with 8.5 years that they bought back. But if they did that after they got out of the service, that certainly would not have been able to do it. And they would have lost themselves upwards to $1,000 a month extra income by not taking advantage of that program during the window in which they could. Now, before we wrap up, I want to slow things down for a moment because this part matters more than any single benefit that I have mentioned thus far. Now, one of the hardest truths about military service isn't deployments, it's not the long hours or even the transitions. It's realizing sometimes years later that important decisions were made without full information. Not because you weren't capable or not because you didn't even care, but because the system assumes knowledge it never clearly provides. That's why so many people don't discover certain benefits until it feels too late. And when I say too late, I don't always mean the benefit's gone. Sometimes it just means the leverage is gone. The timing has changed, the options are fewer, and the outcomes look different than it could have. That realization, folks, can be very frustrating. It can be unfair, but it is also clarifying. Because once you understand how these systems actually work, you stop blaming yourself and you start planning better. That's really what this channel is all about. No hype, no shortcuts, but clarity. Information only helps if it arrives early enough to influence decision. And understanding gives you something far more valuable than advice. It gives you options. Options about how you use your benefits. Options about when to make certain moves in life or in your career. Options about what you prioritize next. You are still serving for those of you who are. And if you're still serving, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't need to know everything. You don't even have to have everything figured out right now. But what you do need to understand is what exists and how timing works and where decisions quietly compound. Now, if you're already out, this isn't about regret. No, it's not about regret. You can't change anything that you could have done. but it is about context. Understanding why certain outcomes look the way they do helps you at least make peace with your past decisions and make smarter decisions going forward. It's one of the benefits of serving in the military. You have opportunities to learn and grow in ways that people who've never served in the military have ever been able to do. And if this video raised questions, that's actually a good thing. I have another video on this channel where I break down 10 military benefits people aren't using, but they should, in much more detail. You guys should check it out. Now that video gives you the full landscape. This one was meant to explain why timing, why awareness, and sequence matters so much. You guys need to just take your time with this information. Rewatch it if you need to. Pause where something connects. Because the goal isn't to consume the content. The goal is to understand systems well enough to make better decisions inside them. That's how people end up with very different outcomes, even when their careers look similar on paper. And that's why I do this channel, to help you see the system clearly. This is the Adjutant, and I'll see you in the next one. Shalom.